Good evening, everyone. Good evening. This is Praveen Soni, Practicing Company Secretary and Central Council member of ICSI from Mumbai. Welcome you all to this Master Knowledge Series Enable, Evaluate, and Excel EEE 4.0. It's a unique initiative of ICSI to build intellectual capacity by way of holding weekly webinars on the topic of professional interest. I place my sincere thanks to the President and Vice President of the ICSI for this noble initiative. I also place my humble thanks to CS Manish Gupta ji, Chairman of Corporate Law and Governance Committee, for providing me this opportunity to moderate this webinar. Friends, introduction of structural digital database, that is SDD, were made to put in place a framework for prohibition on insider trading in the securities and to strengthen the legal structure in the face of the changing dynamics of the market. SEBI introduced the concept of SDD, which came into effect from 1st of April 2019. The intent of maintaining the SDD is that outflow of sharing of unpublished price-sensitive information, that is UPSI, is recorded. The requirement to maintain the structural digital database is given under the SEBI PIT Regulation 35 and is applicable to all the listed companies and the intermediaries who handle the UPSI of a listed company in the course of business and operations. The obligation under the PIT regulation for maintenance of SDD are of twofold. That is, it is applicable on the listed companies as well as on its fiduciaries who might be having access to the UPSI pertaining to the listed company in the capacity of being connected person. The database shall contain the information which includes the following, like the details of the unpublished price sensitive information, UPSI, and the details of the person with whom the UPSI is shared, along with their PAN and other unique identifier information, and the details of the person with whom the information has been shared. Friends, in this regard, the companies are required to submit a quarterly compliance certificate, either signed by a compliance officer or a practicing company secretary, as a standard process under the SEBI PIT regulations. With the intent of appraising and updating the governance professional on the nitty-gritty of the SDD and compliance mechanism thereof, the Institute is conducting today's 4th session on the topic Structural Digital Database. Today, to deliberate on the topic of this session, we have with us CS Makaran Joshi, again practicing company secretary with more than 22 years of experience. And it's my proud privilege to Makaran Joshi sir to read your profile in front of all our members. Mr. Joshi is the founder partner of MMJC and instrumental in creating MMJC mobile app on the Bare Act of the Companies Act 2013. He is member of the group on the Secretary Standard Board of ICSI and expert committee of the SEBI for facilitating ease of doing business. He is also a member of the magazine committee and the legal representation committee of the Chamber of Tax Consultants Mumbai and have actively contributed to the research committee of the ICSI. He has delivered more than 500 lectures at various forums of the ICSI, other industrial associations, and various other professional forums also. It's my proud privilege to have him as a speaker in today's session and to get benefited from his word of wisdom in the era of structural digital database. With this brief profile, we welcome you, sir, and to all the participants on this 4th session of the EEE 4.0 Master Knowledge Series, and hope to have an enthusiastic learning. Over to you, Makaran Joshi, sir.
Thank you, Praveen. And thanks to ICSI. Probably we had a few more sessions on SDD earlier. One was with Bombay Stock Exchange and SEBI, and another was National Stock Exchange and SEBI, maybe a year back or so. Praveen said it very right that this is applicable not only to listed companies, to all use the word connected person. So anyone who is required to handle UPSI is what the regulation 35 says. And Praveen, I remember when in 2019, this STD came, and in SSB, we were discussing about, you were also there at that time, SSB, about
Yes.
SDD. And there was a debate in some of the forums whether SDD requires internal sharing of UPSI. From there, of course, it is required. And then from there, then the question was whether STD is only to equity listed companies. Why rate listed companies have to comply? How about InvIT rate? Whether they also have to comply. any listed entity means equity listed company or even otherwise. So all
Exactly.
those questions also got settled over the period. And this 3.5, which mandates everyone who is required to need to handle UPSI. They don't talk about listed company at all in 3.5. Any board or director or the head of the analogous body, whoever is required to handle UPSI, they have to maintain STD, is what simple terms 3.5 says. And now ICSI also issued a guidance somewhere in 2023 probably to all the members saying that we are as a fiduciary regulated under PIT regulation. We need to have code of conduct, we need to have compliance officer, and we also need to have SDD. So we have crossed a long journey in a very short period. Initially, when SDD came, there was a discussion in intellectual group that there are no SDD providers. There is no uniformity with respect to the services which are rendered and why it is being made mandatory. And now we have got this implemented so far very nicely via regulator, via institutes initiative, and with the support of all the professionals. And now UPSI and materiality is also getting what you say, more and more clarity is emerging because of amendment in the material regulation 30 definition of materiality, because of that threshold based norms which are about turnover or profit or net worth. Then we also have very recently with the SEBI's new concept paper which was introduced and which became a regulation now with respect to whenever there is a material movement in the price, that is also considered as material information. And we have industry standard forums document about what will be considered as material information based on price movement. And till date, UPSI was always preemption based, that a listed company feels that probably this is a price sensitive information. And now a regulator has moved to a scenario where the actual movement of price is also one of the contributors in deciding whether it is a material information and whether it should have been a price sensitive information or not. So we have come far way, and this is a very fast journey for a professional, for the industry, and therefore more and more such sessions are always useful. I will share with PPT, Praveen, maybe for 45 minutes, 50 minutes, 10, and then balance whatever time we can go for more and more question answers. Right, Praveen?
We'll definitely use it for question answer.
Like Praveen had suggested that we should have more and more time for question answer. So I'll restrict this, and this is a very good thought.
Thing is that, sir, the topic is burning and lots of practical issues are there with the companies, those who are with the listed company secretaries, companies with the listed companies. So I got a lot of queries. So I thought we should have more and more of us will have the light of topics from you, and then we'll have more and more questions. So that was the intent.
So whoever are attending this session, they can start writing down their questions as and when they have in the chat box, right?
Yes. So we are assembling the questions from then, and I'll checking with you.
Sure. So see if you are able to see my screen.
Yes, sir, it's visible. Please go ahead.
So structured digital database is a game changer and very effective initiative. In 1992, when PIT regulation came, it was like Gandhiji's three bandars, that Bura mat dekho, Bura mat karo, Bura mat suno, Bura mat bolo. But what is UPSI was not clear, and how are we going to enforce was not, the mechanism were not effective. But after 2015 regulation, and particularly after 2019 amendment, and particularly after this particular amendment, which became effective on 1st April 2019, this became a very, very important game changer initiative to strengthen regulation with respect to prohibition of insider trading. Now, prohibition of insider trading itself, if we see the enforcement related statistics, it indicates that how serious regulator is about enforcement of this particular regulation. More than 400 orders have been passed so far, and 312 orders were adjudication orders and 90 are settlement orders around. 265 crore plus penalty has been levied so far by the regulator. And 220 plus 10, so around 230 orders are on window closure, contract pre-clearance, and any code of conduct violation. Around 90 were violations of insider trading, where the regulator has charged the traders saying that this is the insider trading. And then we have around 80 about disclosure. Many CXOs had to compromise their position. Out of 386 people, more than 25% of the people were debarred from the capital market, and some of the compliance officers were also penalized. So it is good enough kind of a statistics for anyone to take enforcement implementation of these regulations very, very seriously. Compliance officer is a very, very important, has a very important role in implementing prohibition of insider trading regulation. And in implementing prohibition of insider trading regulation in the company, one is the implementation of code of conduct, identification of designated persons, updating designated persons details with another SDD, that is system driven disclosure. So which we is updating about updating designated persons details with one of the repositories, so that the trades can be tracked and so that the demat accounts can be freezed. So there are two SDDs for the audience. There are two SDDs. One is structured digital database and two is system driven disclosure. We are talking about the STD, which is structured digital database, which is arising out of regulation 3.5. We are not talking about system driven disclosure in this discussion. For those who may not be aware about confused about which of the STD we are talking about. So this is structured digital database, and in PIT regulation, when for a compliance officer, code of conduct, fair disclosure code, designated person identification is important. Alongside that, maintenance of a effective structured digital database is very, very important. Now, in recent time, there were two orders which are available at public domain, where compliance officer was asked by SEBI about the access of structured digital database, finding out who all were aware about this particular piece of in UPSI. So regulator has been asking this very regularly, and as the rumor verification structure also goes forward, these access to structured digital database, inquiry about who all were updated about this, all such questions are going to only increase. And therefore, all the compliance officers and all the practicing company secretaries or anyone who is expected to handle UPSI, for them, today's discussion, we will focus on structured digital database of listed entity and structured digital database for fiduciary, like you and me. Praveen is also now on a practicing company secretary side. And therefore, him, me, and everyone on a consulting side, maybe an audit, maybe advisory, maybe consulting, maybe valuer, maybe resolution professional, insolvency resolution professional, maybe mediation and conciliation practitioner, because the institute is also coming out and empowering members to venture into various service areas. So if in any service area, if you are rendering your services to listed company, and because of which you are expected to receive UPSI, then all of us also need to have this SDD. So what is SDD is very, very important. Actually, there was no need for any confusion as to who is required to maintain SDD, because 3.5 clearly says that every person required to handle, and therefore it includes listed company, it includes companies which are fiduciaries like auditors, consultants, and advisors, and such people, and resolution professionals, valuers, and also intermediaries, semi-intermediaries, brokers, merchant bankers, portfolio managers, and many other registrar and transfer agent, obviously, whoever, and then other includes even a supplier or a vendor. The other day, I was talking to one unlisted company, Praveen, and I understood from his business that his supply is to one of the large listed companies. I asked him that from your procurement, which this listed company does from you, is there a relation of listed companies' procurement versus their turnover? He said that yes, if they procure say 10 rupees from me, their turnover is 100 rupees. So that kind of prediction is there even with unlisted companies, and as being a supplier or a major distributor or an agency, and even if you are an unlisted entity, maybe company, may not be company. But if you are required to handle UPSI, then you are supposed to enter, you are supposed to maintain SDD. And what the data should contain is, of course, the nature of UPSI. And they also talk about person sharing information and the name of the person who receives the information. So the word is person. Hello.
Yes, sir. We are listening.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, yes, it is visible, sir. Very much.
So when you say person, for example, a listed company engages Makarandam Joshi and Company, then that's a partnership firm, for example, or an LLP, and they share it with one of our partners, say Kumudini Bhalerao Paranspe. Then what they will enter is they will enter the person's name. Now, what is person? Person here means the name of the partner or the individual with whom the data is shared, and it also means the body where for whom that individual is associated with or for whom that individual is working. And therefore, the name of the entity with whom you are sharing and the person in that entity with whom you are sharing, both their details have to get captured in STD. C5 also says that it cannot be outsourced, it has to be maintained internally, and you should have enough controls, internal control. And while describing internal control, they say that such as timestamp audit trail, which ultimately has to lead to non-temperable database. So non-temperability of the database is the minimum expected outcome of the structured digital database. In initial years, many companies argued that we will maintain an Excel sheet, but that can be edited and that can be tampered, and therefore that is not possible. There were softwares earlier, Praveen, which allowed modification, which allowed addition, deletion, which allowed backend data entry and all of that. Now, that is also not a accepted structured digital database because it has to have it has to capture real time entry. And thereafter, Stock Exchange particularly clarified that no SDD can provide deletion entry, deletion as a possibility. If you want to modify, then you will have to put an asterisk and make a fresh entry if there is an error in earlier entry. But you cannot delete earlier entry. That feature cannot be there in structured digital database. With respect to internal and external and outsourcing, also there were so many questions which were there in the minds of many people and which also got sorted one by one. So if we see the progress, April 19, the concept of SDD came. April 19 itself, SEBI came out with an FAQ where they clarified that even intermediate fiduciary has to maintain. But there also they had said intermediary and fiduciary. And therefore, many arguments came as to whether a banker is a fiduciary or an intermediary, whether a supplier or customer who has access to consultant who has access to UPSI, whether he will be considered as fiduciary and intermediary. But the word used in 3.5 is any person who is supposed to, who is required to handle UPSI. And therefore, it is beyond intermediary fiduciary concept, which is again getting clarified again and again from the regulator. Then somewhere in one of the FAQs, SEBI initially said in April 21 that STD cannot be kept in cloud, but subsequently they have come out with a little relaxed version somewhere in you say that March 23, they clarified that if you want to maintain it in a cloud, that ultimately you have to ensure that the access of this SDD is not available to anyone. And if you are ready to take care of that, it's your responsibility, then you can very well do it on a cloud also. Then again, there was a clarification that it's not restricted to equity listed, it is even to debt listed and any listed entity for that matter. Because PIT regulations, if we he refer means sometimes it uses the word listed company. And therefore, many people ask me that if I'm a body corporate but not a company, will I have to comply with SDD? The answer to that is yes. Any listed entity is the interpretation which we have to take. And listed, it may be not even a body corporate, it may be a REIT or InvIT, but those also will get covered under STD for sure. Somewhere in August, stock exchanges asked for, started asking for a lot of data, and somewhere in 22, stock exchange also started doing inspection, and thereafter, many such executive director of SEBI conducted some webinars for the members whose inspection report were not giving a very clear picture, and he addressed personally. And regulator has been maintaining a lot of educational related drives, stock exchange and SEBI and institute both. And thereafter, in January 23, again the name of the company, stock exchanges, wherever after the inspection report or wherever because of annual compliance report which you or me might have issued, Praveen, or the secretarial audit report, if you have qualified that 3-5 is not maintained, then their compliance officer's name started getting appeared on a stock exchange website. That also became a concern for many members that if the company is not maintaining SDT, their name also appears on the stock exchange as a ticker saying that this company is not a compliant with SDD. So this became like a caution to the investors that they are not, this listed entity does not have enough controls with respect to insider trading, and that could impact the price, that definitely impacts the reputation of an individual and of the company. Earlier, like Praveen said, there was the initiative of quarterly certification, and for those companies who have now annual secretarial compliance report, for them this quarterly certification is not required. Once in a year, practicing company secretary giving annual compliance report is good enough. But wherever annual compliance certificate is not there, then quarterly certificate, like Praveen also had highlighted in his opening remark, that still remains valid for SME listed companies or for those companies where annual compliance report is not mandatory. Even for a newly listed company, till your first annual compliance report is issued, you have to give this quarterly certificate. So as of now, there is a hybrid. Some companies require quarterly compliance certificate, some companies require yearly compliance certificate. Somewhere in 2023, SEBI Stock Exchange started asking a lot of data from the companies wherever they have doubt with respect to trades, particularly for financial result or with any major announcement which has happened and on which wherever they have observed any suspicious trade, they started asking for all the MIS reports. They started asking for all in chronological order, whatever events have happened till the disclosure. They started asking for the names of entities who are aware about it. They asked for connected persons list. They asked for SDD extract, and they also asked for who had access to SDD and all such data. And therefore, if you see, if one interlinks or reconciles with each other, and then obviously the trades done by those people. Now, wherever there are situations where some connected persons' names have not appeared in SDD, and that connected person happens to be a printer, publisher, or a newspaper agency who coordinates for publication of results, or a statutory auditor, then all such names, if they are not captured, stock exchanges have, and the regulator has been asking more and more detail why their names are not appearing. If CFO's details or full accounts detail, team's details are not appearing in SDD, again they are asking why it is not appearing. And therefore, more and more questions are getting raised, uh, and more and more. In fact, in one of our case, Praveen, one of our client, we submit the details of the names of individuals who are working on that assignment. And one of the client, when he was verifying his quarterly bank post, for fortnightly bank post, weekly bank post, I'm sorry, he told us that one of your trainee who works with us had to, we have observed that there is a trade. And then as a compliance officer from my office, they initiated an action, they levied a penalty, and also intimated to stock exchange, because as a fiduciary intermediary also, wherever our own employees violate the trade, then we have to intimate that obligation is casted. The form is not yet prescribed, but the obligation is there. And therefore, compliance officers of the professional service firms have to be more and more careful about how do they ensure that all these compliances are done. And I'm going to share a few things on how a compliance officer can take care so that he does, even if he is being asked a question by regulator tomorrow, he should be able to answer them convincingly, confidently. So who has to maintain? As we discussed that every listed entity except mutual funds as of now, because mutual funds applicability of PIT is not yet been effective, although the amendment has happened, but it has not been made effective. And that one thing apart from that, AIF, REIT, InvIT, NCD listed, securitized debt instruments, equity share listed, any security listed, you have to maintain. Every practicing professional firm, you may be statutory auditor, you may be secretarial auditor, or you may be just a consultant. You may be cost auditor, or you may be just a consultant. But if you have access to UPSI, definitely you have to maintain SDD. Every banker, every non-banking finance company, every broker, financial intermediaries, merchant bankers, everyone has to. And if they happen to be a listed entity, then they need to have two SDDs, one for listed entity purpose and other for with respect to handling UPSI of other listed companies, their client company. Plus, if you are a supplier, dealer, customer, anyone, any law firm, any insolvency professional, everyone has to maintain this SDD. If you see the format, everyone, this is very, very clear from Regulation 3.5. If it is about a listed company, sorry, if it is about a listed company, then the name of course, the nature of UPSI will have to be disclosed, and the individual who is sharing this UPSI from the company, and the name of the entity with whom the UPSI is shared, and the individual who is working in that entity, his name, and the PAN numbers of both. And if they do not have PAN number, then any other legal identifier. And whenever there is any material development in the UPSI, then again sharing of that material development also needs to be updated in STD. This we will discuss as we move further, Praveen, whether one entry is good enough or whenever there is any material development that also required to be updated in STD. When we talk about maintenance of STD, what is internal, whether cloud server allowed, whether I have to have an internal server, whether Amazon, Google types of servers are allowed, not allowed. So now, as we discussed earlier, SEBI and Stock Exchange have clarified that it's fine to have on a cloud. What they say is the board is solely accountable for all the aspects related to maintenance of data on a cloud or any other method. And the board and the compliance officer, both, even compliance officer is responsible. Board and compliance officer has to ensure that the confidentiality, integrity, and security of this data and logs and ensure the compliance with this law. And board and compliance officer shall be responsible and accountable for any violation of same. So with full responsibility, if compliance officer and the board feels that we are okay to maintain it on the cloud, that is possible, is what SEBI clarified in its FAQ, which was updated FAQ on 31st March 23. Earlier, there were some vendors, Praveen, who were used to provide, who had hosted that SDD software on their portal, and they used to give access to the companies to make an entry. So those kind of vendors and that kind of arrangement was not acceptable, which also regulator in their inspection clarified, and the majority of those companies have already shifted to their own servers. Those who have not yet shifted, please shift it to your own server. You cannot keep it on your supplier. Even earlier, making entries were outsourced to some software developer themselves that take this log and make an entry. That is also not possible. That is also not acceptable, because first of all, sharing of UPSI has to be on need to know basis. Why are we sharing it to third party for making an entry? That kind of maintenance would not be acceptable. There are many companies who have group of listed companies, and they have been maintaining it on a one server. And to that also, in one of the FAQs, the stock exchange had clarified that if you have a group of companies, they say that in case of as per regulation 3.5 of the PIT regulation, company shall maintain SDD internally with adequate internal controls and checks. And therefore, when it comes to maintaining for a group of companies, they say that it is understood that every company shall maintain an independent SDD to comply with these prerequisites as prescribed under 3.5. Our institute, in one of the publications, Praveen, the institute has clarified that wherever there are a group of companies, and if you are having one server where SDD is also hosted, you can do that provided there is a China wall and there is absolutely China wall and need to know basis and no access of this SDD to any other group company. So that control responsibility would be on the board and the compliance officer, and therefore wherever you have group companies, it is always desirable, and I would insist that maintain it on your own server. But there are some groups where, particularly when you are a foreign subsidiaries entity here, you may have some servers which are shared by your other group entities globally also. There you need to have China wall of on need to know basis. Second question which comes in the mind of many people, in earlier scenario, many people used to ask that who has to make an entry in STD. First of all, one who has access to that UPSI, he only can maintain, who he only can make an entry in STD. If I am making entry for someone else, that means I got an access of that UPSI from him. So first entry has to be that my boss shared the information with me, and then I can share it with someone. So it has to be by a designated person. Designated person, the difference between designated person and connected person is every designated person is connected person, but every connected person may not be designated person. So outsiders, consultants, suppliers, these are maybe connected persons, but they are not designated persons. So generally, designated person has an access to SDD, and if he has access of that UPSI, his name is already appearing in the SDD either as an originator of the UPSI or the receiver of the UPSI, which got originated from someone else. Only such people can share that and can have access to SDD for making entries. Immediate relatives, of course, cannot have access to SDD because they are not DPs and they are not supposed to know about the information and they are not supposed to share with anyone either. Employees of subsidiaries of the company, can they have access to SDD of a listed holding company? Employees of a material subsidiary and subsidiary, if you have covered it in your designated persons list, DP list, then definitely uh, you will have to give them the access of SDD because whenever they are sharing the relevant UPSI, UPSI may be hold subsidiaries quarterly numbers. That number they are sharing with their auditor. They need to have access to SDD and they should make an entry. Many companies still compliance officer makes an entry in SDD. Actually, it's not a good practice. It's not a good idea. It should be the person who is supposed to handle that UPSI. And there is no need for compliance officer to know every UPSI. He need not know. And he need not know and therefore he cannot make entry. Many companies have adopted department-wise nodal officer concept. That nodal officer is made in charge of ring fencing and ensuring that this UPSI is shared internally or externally only on need to know basis. And the making entry responsibility is also casted by many companies on that nodal officer. Now, nodal officer is not a concept under PIT regulation. This is a concept which has emerged as an industry practice and we propagate this concept because every designated person, if you give autonomy to share to anyone, then there it can create a chaos. And therefore, for each UPSI, for each department, there can be a nodal officer or alternatively for each UPSI, there can be one nodal officer who decides whom to bring in the insider list and who otherwise no one else can be brought in the insider list. So UPSI per nodal officer per UPSI is a very good concept and then he will make an entry whenever he's sharing this UPSI with anyone else. And that's a good practice which one may adopt. This will also help you to identify UPSI and therefore tracking it in SDD, and of course to make a disclosure at an appropriate time to with respect to material disclosure under Regulation 30. This framework and structure will also help companies to conduct inquiry whenever there is a leak of UPSI, conduct inquiry whenever there are rumor verification to be done. So this nodal officer concept we strongly advocate, and many companies should adopt this concept. Then there are companies, Praveen, who uh, have developed a tool which sits on their email server. So whenever one designated person is sharing another to another designated person or an external agency, any UPSI, he will flag in that mailing system that this is a UPSI, and he will be able to share that with anyone only when his name is entered in the designated persons list, and only when the receiver has been identified, his PAN number, PAN details, and email address, and other details are already there in the STD, and then he will be able to send the mail. And once the mail is sent, that receiver and sender details will automatically get captured in the structured digital database. So that gives ease that this will become a real-time update kind of a thing. There are some challenges and there are some advantages in it. First of all, making entry in SDD as a separate job gets eliminated to a large extent. However, if the information is shared orally and not via email, then still a manual entry in SDD will be required, and this may get missed. And some tools where we have seen that this tool does not convert itself into or does not get reported in the SDD on real time. Someone has to do a pull basis, someone has to pull that data in the SDD. Now, if that is the practice, then this SDD will have a lag from the date of sharing to actually getting updated in SDD, and that should be avoided is our recommendation. It should be real time. Even if you develop such smart tool, it has to be real time updated, because as soon as I share UPSI with anyone, SDD will have to be updated immediately is a maybe or simultaneously is the point. So it cannot be done after a week or 10 days or 5 days. It will be a violation, and then compliance officer will have to take action. And if he does not take action, he may be subjected to some questions from the regulator. Some crucial points which come up for questions. Many times these questions I receive, Praveen, with respect to maintaining of SDD, whether SDD for once in a financial year, एक ही बार, someone I had asked me this question that for a year, for quarterly result, we will add all the people in accounts, all the people in secretarial, all the people with secretaries to the CXOs as and their name we will add, and for full year we will add that every quarter these names will be there. Now this is not a good practice, definitely, and there was also a practice that many companies, as soon as trading window is closed for the financial result, they put the names of all the people whose names are appearing in trading window closure at one go. They update in SDD. Now that is also not a good practice, as and when you share the information with any designated person, every time you have to update it in SDD. And if you make some material update, for example, there was one large listed company who there was an insider trading matter on this. They had a subsidiary in Australia, and there was some litigation about that particular subsidiary, and those financial results, when they received in India of that subsidiary, that was considered as another starting date of a UPSI. So in one UPSI, there can be 2 or 3 milestones which may change the character of this UPSI. For example, if you're making in a making of a financial result, at a standalone basis, you have X profit, and after receiving the subsidiary number, your X profit either depletes substantially or gets eliminated completely. Then that second information is also new UPSI, and whoever are aware about that particular piece, that should be updated, captured in the in SDD. And whenever anyone is sharing UPSI with anyone and is updating STD, he has to also ensure that he takes care of the code of conduct compliance of process where the process is prescribed of how do you admit someone as insider. So that process also one needs to take care. Sometimes, many times, this question comes to us that if the other person is not ready to share PAN detail, for example, if the income tax department asks me some data or the banker asks me some data and I am providing that data, but the person with whom am I talking is not ready to share his PAN detail, how do I deal with it? There are many companies who have subsidiaries abroad or holding companies abroad, and whenever they ask their local unique identifier number, many times they resist, saying that we have a data protection law which under which you cannot ask us this detail and will not be providing you this detail. So first of all, we have to educate them, cite them the relevant provisions of the regulation, show them the provisions of FAQs which are issued by SEBI Stock Exchange, so that they get clarity that this is a law in India and it has to be complied with. But even after making best efforts, you have to demonstrate your efforts. Those efforts of asking PAN details should be visible, should be retrievable, should be demonstrable. So you should send mails, maintain memos, and all of that. In spite of repeated follow-up, if you are unable to get the detail, still not making an entry cannot be the answer. To the best possible, whatever unique identifier details you have, you should maintain, update the SDD and mention their name. And whatever details you have their mobile number, you have their email address, at least update that to the best. Will this be a compliance of law? It may not be a compliance of law. But if you are not, even after repeated efforts, if the other person is not cooperating and not giving data, you cannot comply with it anyway. You have to escalate it to your top bosses. Let top bosses talk to that person and ensure that the compliances are done. So your efforts should be demonstrated, and even after doing all those efforts, if you are not able to get, then definitely you have to have his name or other unique identifier for sure. There are many situations where wherever there are diligences, then there is a data room concept, and you may give access of that data room to multiple people. Even for financial result preparation, data rooms created. So whenever you get data room created and whenever you upload price sensitive information in that data room, although you have not personally shared that information with a particular individual, but the fact that you have given access of this UPSI to those to whom this data room has an access, all of their names and their unique identification PAN number preferably should be entered in structured digital database. Sharing email on a group email ID where this ID is being accessed by multiple people, such group email addresses should be avoided for sharing UPSI, because in that situation you do not know with whom all you are sharing this particular information. Because whenever you share an information with any individual, and if you are sharing with 10 individuals, you have to, from one body, any client shares some data with me, Kumudini, Saurabh, or any other partner and some associate directors of MMJC, all of those individual names will have to get captured in the SDD. If we create one common group email ID and ask client to share on that email ID, that kind of practice cannot be accepted, because it would mean that I don't know with whom I am sharing this information. There has to be enough control, is the point. So with group email ID, if you are able to demonstrate that there is enough control with the person who is sharing, then he can always take a view, but it is better to avoid this. Uh, some questions which I received during adjudication process, some designated person who is sitting in R&D department at some R&D center of the company, since his name is there in the DP list, the compliance officer mentioned his name in SDD, saying that on 1st of April or 1st of July, I shared all these 100 DPs are aware about this UPSI. Actually, this is not a good practice. SDD should be updated as and when the data is shared by one person to another. And therefore, if such scenarios have happened, but you do not have access to UPSI, actually, SDD has been updated as a caution or as an abundant caution by a compliance officer. You can always debate, but the burden of proof will always be on the person who is a designated person who is reasonably expected to have access to UPSI. If you do not have an access to UPSI, but still window was closed for you, still your name was updated in SDD, the burden of proof will be on you, you have to remember. And therefore, those who are attending this webinar, and if those are not compliance officers, they can also talk to their compliance officers from the context of changing the practice. This also question comes that now the DMAT accounts and based on PAN number, based on that other SDD, that is system driven disclosure, because of that mechanism, DMAT freezing of PAN happens and freezing of DMAT and trading account happens. Still, whether structured digital database is relevant? Answer to that is yes. Now, more and more orders are getting passed where trading may not be established, but sharing of UPSI is treated as equal sin by the regulator, because Regulation 3 and Regulation 4. Regulation 3 puts a restriction on sharing of UPSI, and Regulation 4 puts a restriction on trading based on that UPSI. So these are two independent. And if you see the chronology, sharing is first, which is not allowed unless and until there is a need to know, and trading comes second. So the point is, whether you are trading or not trading, but with whom you are sharing, that is also very important. And therefore, SDD is structured digital database is not going to lose its relevance, even though freezing of PAN happens, because this is a tool which clearly tells the regulator that who all were made aware about this UPSI and when. Now, this certificate which has to be issued, there are many companies, generally large companies have to get annual secretarial compliance report and they have to submit it quarterly. But any other entity which is maybe listed pursuant to demerger or any other SME listed company for whom annual secretarial compliance report may not be applicable, or for whom say corporate governance provisions are not applicable, or rate or INVIT, or newly listed entities, they have to update, they have to give certificate every quarter, and it can be either by the compliance officer or a practicing company secretary, either of them. And for all other large listed companies for whom corporate governance provisions are applicable, annual secretarial compliance report is applicable, for them, that one-time certificate which a practicing company secretary issues before end of May, that is good enough. When you are functioning as a compliance officer, and even if you are functioning as a secretarial auditor, this is the role which a compliance officer can do. First of all, map all Reg 30 announcements versus UPSI. And with respect to that UPSI, who all DP's names are appearing, whether there are some logical names which should have appeared and have not appearing in SDD, that we should check. We should also check whether there has been trading done with respect to those individuals. We have to ensure that the SDD is updated promptly and there is no delay, because even if there is a delay, it will be considered as a violation of the regulation, and violation of regulation will require reporting. First of all, taking action, levying some penalty, or taking action as per your policies and processes adopted by the listed company, and reporting of that to stock exchange. So this is also a very important role which a compliance officer has to do. Remember that code of conduct violation or regulation violation, both will have to be tracked by the compliance officer. And whenever there is a violation, the action has to be taken and reporting has to be done by compliance officer to the stock exchange. And for doing that, for ensuring that SDD is real-time updated, a lot of training needs to be done by the compliance officer to designated persons. Sometimes you may conduct a training even to your suppliers, key customers, and ensure that they are updated key consultants. Many times I have seen that software, which when you purchase a software, it's on annual subscription basis, and annual subscription fee, if you don't pay on time, then the vendor may stop your service. And if he stops your service, then what will happen is you will not have an SDD for certain period of time, and then it will become your default. And therefore, compliance officer has to ensure that this is updated and renewed from time to time. If you have given updating SDD, making entry in the SDD as a responsibility to nodal officer or to the designated person, then taking declarations every quarter from them and linking those declaration as a mandatory thing for your KPI, KRA, your performance or your payrolls can be a good idea, so that you are able to get those declarations. And as a compliance officer, you can demonstrate that, look, this is the responsibility casted on that nodal officer or designated person. I made so many efforts to make him update about this requirement. I have been reviewing SDD, and if I see some logical entries which are not appearing, I am questioning about it. And over and above that, I am taking a declaration. Then, even if there are some lapses in SDD because of some DP has not made some entries, compliance officer will not be penalized. So this is very important. You can also create various alerts during window closure period to those DPs that are ensure that you are not sharing it without entering into confidentiality agreements and updating in SDD and such kind of stuff. And whenever you levy penalty on for not maintaining SDD, then you have to report about it to the regulator. So, and remember one thing, that if you do not ensure that this SDD is there, then your name can appear, and the company's name and the compliance officer's name can be can face a lot of issues with this reputation risk. And removing that from the stock exchange ticker, then you have to prove to the stock exchange that now I'm compliant, and now you remove this. It may, of course, regulator will reciprocate to, if he is convinced about the rectification, you have to convince regulator. Till then, this name will keep appearing. And SEBI has issued many warning letters to many listed companies with respect to not maintaining SDD or not updating it on timely manner. So this was everything about my role as a listed company. But even if we are practicing company secretaries, those who are attending this session, or any other broker, merchant banker, NBFC, their role is far more complex than listed company, because you handle UPSI of multiple companies. Now, what happens in such scenario? The format is more or less same, except that here we have to have in the SDD format, we need to have the provision for name of the company and the name of the individual who is sharing this information from the listed company. These details also have to be there. Plus, at my end, who received it and whom am I sharing internally, their name, their PAN number, what is the nature of UPSI. And whenever you get any new update, material update with respect to that UPSI, then that also will have to be updated in SDD. Eventually, Praveen, it may happen that something like a depository concept may emerge, where this SDD, because here I am as a listed entity, I may be making some entry. You, as the compliance of a company secretary, practicing company secretary, may be making some entries. So if it syncs, and if there are limited service providers, then probably this sharing of investigation for a regulator can become seamless. Or there can be some tool where different SDDs are talking to with each other, and they are reconciling, and their details are also getting shared with the regulator whenever it is required. Many professionals are receiving notices from stock exchange about maintenance of SDD, and we have to give this confidence to regulator that yes, we have SDD, we have compliance officer, we are updating the entries on timely manner. We also have mechanism, so all that is necessary. As we discussed earlier, SDD maintenance is required by all persons who are handling UPSI, and therefore not restricted to SEBI regulated intermediaries or auditors. It is applicable even to internal auditors or cost auditors or any other consultant who have access to UPSI. The other day, I was talking to one chartered accountant, and he said that in our fraternity now, it is more or less clear to statutory auditors that they have to maintain update SDD, but many times internal auditor, consultants, valuers, and IBPI professionals, they are still not having SDD. But we have to be very careful, and we have to have SDD. If you are a SEBI intermediary and a listed company, then you need to have an independent SDD because nature of UPSI and designated persons. For me as a fiduciary intermediary and for me as a listed company are separate because my CXOs, my CFOs, my CS may not fall under the designated person list as a fiduciary. And whoever are falling as a fiduciary designated person under fiduciary list, they may not fall under the designated person list of a listed company. And therefore, you require an independent STD is my urge. And you should have separate DP list also and separate UPSI, separate SDD, separate code, all of that. While making entries in structured digital database, every partner, senior partner, compliance officer, head of department, and sometimes you may give access even to the trainees if the firm is small. And if you have access to trainees with respect to sharing of UPSI between one trainee to another, then those access will have to be provided. But those who are not considered as DPs, they cannot have access to SDD is one thing which we have to remember very clearly. And this is again the role of compliance officer of a practicing company secretary firm or chartered accountant firm. What he has to do is he has to first of all check what all assignments are getting handled in my firm versus whether those assignments, if those happen to be UPSI, whether those names are entered in SDD or not. We have to see whether there is a need to know basis. We also have to ensure that there is enough China wall between the two departments. And as a practicing company secretaries, Praveen, we receive these questions from client before onboarding us that how do you safeguard and protect our data from the access you within your internal teams. So you cannot have server which is open to all. So those security safety measures will have to be built internally by all the company secretaries, those who handle unlisted, those who handle listed companies, unpublished price sensitive related transactions. Then with the help of client, you can also tell them that if these are the names of my list of employees who are having access to UPSI shared by you, and please track the trades and share it with us so that if there is any non-compliance done by any of my DP, I can flag it and take an appropriate action. So renewal of SDD, again, it is common for all, creating alerts, giving trainings. There are some brokers, Praveen, who if they what they insist is that you all my designated persons, employees should maintain demat and trading with my company only so that I can track if they are trading in my company or my holding company or my subsidiary company shares. So this this initiative can also be helpful and data room protection, China wall protection. See, this is going to add some expenditure, some outflow of money for practicing company secretaries, having compliance officer, having SDD, having China walls between the data rooms. All of that becomes very, very critical. There are already some pronouncement on this subject wherever fiduciary has not been able to maintain internal control with respect to sharing of data, is being questioned. And ICSI has also issued an advisory already with respect to uh, mandating our members that if you handle UPSI, you need to have all of these concepts. Crucial factor with respect to maintaining SDD for a fiduciary or intermediary is that we have to maintain a negative list of uh, companies for whom, and that negative list cannot be open for everyone. It has to be with the compliance officer. Recently, when IGKP Capital Advisors Private Limited had asked in an informal guidance to SEBI that can I maintain my negative list or restricted list open for all so that they know that they should not trade in those shares. And SEBI categorically clarified that this is a restricted list and list of companies for whom you may receive UPSI. You should not be making that list public. So what it means is, for a company secretary in practice like you and me, if an employee wants to trade, he has to seek a pre-clearance from the compliance officer. Compliance officer will see whether it falls under a restricted list. If it is falling under restricted list, then he will see whether it is whether the person has UPSI or not, and accordingly he will decide whether to allow him to trade or not to allow him to trade. So these are the processes we need to have, and whenever there are violations, we have to report the non-compliance, although the format is not yet described. But as a fiduciary intermediary and a person required to handle UPSI, we have to report non-compliances to the stock exchange. With this, I will conclude my PPT, Praveen, and then we can go to question answer if there are questions. And this was the expectation from the PPT, that at least three things which we need to mention in SDD, at least three features of SDD, two methodologies about how do you fix the responsibility of making entries in SDD, ICSI guidance on to PCS. Please refer to that guidance note if you have not yet read about it. February 28, 2024, ICSI issued this guidance note. And what is the role of compliance officer? That also we discussed in today's PPT. With this, Praveen, we can see if there are what questions which we have to. If there are questions, you can see maybe.
Yes, thank you, Makran sir. First of all, you have taken up the detailed about the SDD compliances. And can you remove the slide so that I can see you on the screen? So thank you, Makran sir. You have taken it very detailed manner, and I believe lots of questions has already been answered. So I have tried to club the questions from the institute's secretariat which they are giving me, as well as I told you, the topic is burning and interesting. So I am getting lots of questions on my personal WhatsApp also regarding the same program. So I am collating that also, and we'll definitely try to have more and more questions subject to the availability of time permits. I had clubbed some of the questions so that we can reply them in a comprehensive manner. Some of the small questions like SDD is applicable to a debt listed company.
Yeah,
Yes.
It is applicable to debt listed, InvIT, REIT, any listed entity. And even if you are not a company, body corporate, still it is applicable.
Correct. So unlisted company which is only listed in commercial paper is required to comply with SDD.
Unlisted companies whose commercial paper is listed will also be, because it's commercial paper is not a securities as per securities contract regulation. And therefore, although you are listed, but you're not listed as commercial securities. And in prohibition of insider trading regulation, this is a very technical question, Praveen. But with respect to prohibition of insider trading regulation, they have adopted securities definition, same like SCR.
Okay.
And when commercial paper concept came, although Stamp Act has changed the definition and incorporated commercial paper in securities definition for the Stamp Act purpose, but SCR not yet covered commercial paper, fortunately, because if it gets covered, then Section 42 of Companies Act will also become applicable. So if you are an unlisted company, if you are issued commercial paper which is not securities, then SDD maintenance is not applicable as of now.
So then they are not required to comply with the SDD requirements.
But if you supposed to receive UPSI of another listed company, being a supplier or distributor or any other technology provider, then you have to maintain an STD because you are a person who is required to handle UPSI of listed company.
Okay. Consequences of non-compliance, I think you have shared in the beginning of your slide only. Crores or rupees of punishment is already there.
There's a personal risk now. So many compliance officers getting penalized,
yes.
And reputation loss. So
yeah, that is also bigger thing. So do the intermediaries like statutory auditors also need to maintain SDD at their end? Part 2, what is the consequences if the practicing company secretary is not maintaining the SDD software? Part 3, whether the director should also maintain the SDD.
Interesting. Good question. First of all, intermediary means SEBI intermediary. Statutory auditor, company secretary in practice are not intermediary. They fall under the term fiduciary. So fiduciary, under fiduciary, yes, statutory auditor, company secretary, consultant, anyone. And whether they have to maintain SDD, both of them have to maintain SDD. If the SDD is not maintained, then there is a violation of insider trading regulation. And insider trading regulation has consequences under SEBI Act. So SEBI Act provides for consequences of 10 lakh to crore penalty for any general non-compliance. Similar penalties there for non-making any disclosure declaration which you were supposed to do. And if there is a trading which is done by any of our employee, then he will be subject to 15G, which is insider trading. So there are around 6 to 7 sections in section 11 and 15 of SEBI Act, which talks about penalties which can be levied by SEBI adjudicating authority on the company secretary or on the statutory auditor. There were three questions like
Third one is about the whether the director should also maintain the SDD.
Now, director happens to be a designated person of the company, and therefore, whenever he's sharing any UPSI, he will have to update it in the structured digital database maintained by the listed company, in the listed company. So this question was asked sometime to SEBI by one of the lender, where they had said that our nominee is on the board, and sometimes he shared that information with our credit team and all. So first of all, the question was whether it is legitimate, whether there is a need to know. But if the need to know is proved, then that nominee director will have to update SDD in the company, because he is the DP. He is the DP, therefore he has access to SDD of listed entity. He can update, make an entry there. Over and above that, if you happen to be a banker, then as a banker, you receive a lot of information. For that, you will have your own SDD. So you can make entry, and you have to make entry in that SDD as well.
Taking in length to your questions, let's say the director is there and is in the board of the different companies, let's say the same group companies, and let's say two companies are listed or other are unlisted. So whether he need to intimate through the SDD of both the companies, if let's say they are listed, but whether the matter pertains to the both the companies or not.
So wherever it is relevant, so company A and company B, if they are transacting with each other, and he is on the board of both the companies, for example, now he attends first board meeting of A, where this matter is discussed. So he will update, and if he's receiving information, his name will be entered by the company secretary saying that the agenda is shared. But if you are sharing that information with someone because you are required to share for carrying out your performance of your duty, then you will update in company A, because that is the company who has shared that UPSI with you, and not with company B STD.
Sir, I'll come to a hypothetical situation. Let's say H is the holding company, S is the subsidiary company, S is the wholly owned subsidiary of the H company. Now he is director on the board of both the companies. He is executing a transaction with the subsidiary company and a third company, that is A company, which is nowhere related to the A and H. Now he need to report about the SDD to the S company only. Sorry, to subsidiary only, right? But since it is an wholly owned subsidiary, and whatever is doing shall be impacted or will be impacted by the or impact to the holding company also. And he is on the board of both the companies. Should he impact to the holding also?
S is listed or unlisted?
Unlisted, both unlisted.
So if S is unlisted, then S DPs will be DPs of H, which is a holding listed company. And probably there will be only one SDD. And material event happening at a subsidiary level, which is material and price sensitive to H. And therefore, they will make entries in H STD, because there is no separate STD maintained by subsidiary.
And what if both would be listed company?
then we will have to maintain. But A is, he will update S first because S, there is a need to know and S is aware about it.
Correct.
Whether H will be aware about it, H is not even aware about such transaction happening. So he will make entry in only S, not in H.
But it will impact to the H also, no? Because it is
Correct.
an
No, correct. But that UPSI has not yet reached to, for example, at H level, and he is not sharing with any other DP of H, for example. Then he will not. But if he's sharing with he's sharing something with MD of H or CFO of H, then he will have to share that with H
correct,
SDD
correct.
also.
No, here we are talking about sharing the information to the third party company. So you mean immediate company, as company
Yes.
that is subsidiary, where we
Yes.
need to report about the SDD.
If it is a listed, if it is unlisted, then you will have only one SDD most probably.
Correct. Okay. And just in extension of this question, whether newspaper agencies, print person, supplier, they also need to maintain the SDD?
They also need to maintain an SDD, of course, because they are persons who are handling UPSI.
Correct. Okay. Is it allowed to maintain SDD on AWS cloud?
I don't know what is AWS. Probably it is Microsoft's service. So long as you are able to, like they have casted a responsibility on compliance officer and board, that you have to be sure that it has enough controls with respect to not access and all. So consulting your technology team, if you get convinced that they do not have access, then you can maintain.
Sir, AWS is actually Amazon cloud.
Amazon cloud. So
Yeah.
Amazon cloud is allowed, provided the responsibility is on board and compliance officer to ensure that there is a China wall and data protection, and the server cloud service provider does not have an access. Generally, they do not have. There are agreements to support between the cloud service, cloud server provider, and the user. So he has to have enough controls with him and enough documents to prove that he did his best to ensure that they do not have access.
Okay. If a company is going for IPO, then from which stage the company need to comply with the SED? I think it has to be before they are coming into the IPO.
It is before. Many companies do not understand this. They feel that only when I'm listed, because PIT is applicable to companies proposed to be listed. And what is proposed to be listed, that also has been defined. Generally, when you file of a document with the regulator, that's the starting point of proposed to be listed. From there on, PIT regulations become applicable to you, including maintaining SDD.
I think as per my the listing experience, all the listing compliances become applicable to you the moment you think of being into listing, because after you listed and then you think, yeah, I'll start complying, then it will take some time, maybe a day's time. That till that time you are non-compliant, so they will not accept for an hour even.
Till that time you are not compliant, and there is a concept of proposed to be listed under prohibition insider trading regulation.
Exactly.
The term is used into HB, where they specifically cast duty on companies proposed to be listed. And when do you start proposed to be listed is when you file offer document, is in a simple terms. But those who are curious, they may refer to HB of the prohibition of insider trading regulation.
Right. Again, the relevant question is, are the bank are included in fiduciary or intermediary, and how they are required to comply with the regulations? I'll come with the practical question also joining with this, sir. Generally, when as in corporate, we are talking to the bankers and we are sending them the notice about the sharing of the UPSI, and then ask the bank people, those who are directly connected with the company's transaction, to share their name, PAN number. They are afraid of sharing the information. Even sometimes they deny, boss, it is your choice. You want to give me the information or not? It's your choice, but I will not be able to give my personal PAN number. You take the bank's number, that is okay, but I'll not give my personal PAN number. So how to deal with this situation? The first question is whether the banks are included into intermediate.
Now, yes, they are included. Earlier, the awareness with the banker financial institutions was less. But now every compliance officer of a bank and financial institution, they are aware about this responsibility. They have made enough awareness sessions to their teams. So if any particular employee of the bank is not cooperating, please write to the compliance officer of that bank. Find out who is the compliance officer of that bank as a fiduciary and as a listed company. Either generally it is same, the compliance officer is same. Find out who is the compliance officer for a fiduciary and intermediary role, fiduciary role, I'm sorry. and then write to him, he will have to take action. He will have to ensure that the employee cooperates.
Right. That could be the best way, basically, peaceful way. If there is a private company which is subsidiary of a listed company, and if the net worth of the private company is negative, then still the listed company is subject to UPSI and SDD.
Listed company is subject to UPSI anyway. Private company, which is a subsidiary of a listed, is a public company. Private company has no meaning.
Correct.
Net worth eroded. Okay, fine. No issue.
So whether it's still in that case, the private company is also subject to UPSI? SDD company?
Of course, it is subject to UPSI because whenever there are any material developments at a consolidated level, any material event at a subsidiary level, which is price sensitive at a consolidated level, then this has to be considered as UPSI by a listed holding company. And therefore, particularly if you have sick companies, eroded companies, suddenly when they come in profit zone, suddenly they that becomes a UPSI. And therefore, in this scenario also, with respect to any price sensitive news, event, information happening at such subsidiary level, that will have to be tracked as UPSI and will have to be updated in SDD of a holding listed company.
Whether there can be any threshold of companies considering as in UPSI?
So the best guidance now is under Regulation 30. What that 2%, 5% criteria at a consolidated level. That guidance you can consider. It is not necessary that you have to have the same guidance, but it is desirable that you, now that the materiality threshold has been fixed by the regulator, it is better to follow the same threshold for determining what is UPSI for a listed company or holding listed company. There was an amendment proposed in PIT regulation whereby they were going to introduce reference of Regulation 30 under UPSI definition, but that has not yet been made effective. Probably it may not become effective because there are some events which are covered under Para A of Regulation 30, which may not be price sensitive, which may not be deemed price sensitive. For example, change in company secretary or such issues or registrar and transfer agent. It is material from the context of knowing, making the investor aware about it, but it is not a price sensitive information. And therefore, probably this law change may not happen that every material information is necessarily a price sensitive information, but that is only from those Para A items. As far as Para B items are concerned, wherever you exceed those threshold, it is always safe to consider that those are price sensitive. When SEBI came out with a concept paper prescribing those percentage, they discussed about UPSI, they discussed about press release, they discussed about all these events. And therefore, there is a overlap between material information and a price sensitive information for sure. In fact, material information definition regulation 34 says that whatever can impact price is a material information for sure. And therefore, there is an overlap. And therefore, that threshold guidance, which is for Para B item, is the best guidance for considering UPSI.
Correct. There is one practical question. The board has approved the appointment of independent director on, let's say, 16th of May. And the appointment is going to effective from 1st of July, 1.5 months later. From which date we have to add the new director name into the SDD and has to send him the confidentiality notice?
From the date of appointment.
Effective date or date of appointment?
That is not the resolution date, but the effective date. Because till then, there is no need for he to have access to UPSI.
But if any monthly reports will not be sent again, it
cannot be sent to him because he is not on the board. Why? How can we share
Correct.
it? That will go against the principle of need to know.
He can be given with the basic literature of the company, but that will not amount to UPSI.
Correct. But if, for example, if he is a consultant who is providing his service as a consultant to the company, anyway,
then he cannot be independent.
No, because if that income is not material for him, he may fall under the definition of independent director. The statutory auditor and secretarial auditor cannot become independent director, but other consultant, uh, he may be a lawyer who is doing some litigation for that company. He is aware about some fate of that some matter. The income which he receives does not exceed 10%, and therefore he is eligible as independent director. He is not expected to have access to other UPSI, but whatever UPSI he anyway has. So to that extent, he is covered. So it's a very subjective question, but as a thumb rule, he will get access to UPSI only when he becomes a director. That is 1st of what? 1st of
July.
August, 1st of July.
Yes.
As the date since when you have to consider him as DP.
Perfect. If the company is into CIRP and is not already in compliance of the SDD, now in CRP process, the statutory auditors are appointed by the CUC. In this case, the statutory auditors are required to maintain the SDD in fiduciary capacity.
Yes, you have to maintain. Who appoints is not a matter. Even if you are appointed by CAG or COC or shareholders, you have access to UPSI. But good questions, Praveen.
Yeah.
Few questions this time, and
I told you the topic is interested basically, so I'm getting lots of queries on the personal WhatsApp. But thanks to my secretariat at ICICI headquarters, they are clearing it.
So nice of them.
The person whose name is entered into the SDD is not aware of this entry and denies that he has received or she has received the UPSI. What is the legal position to address this situation? And there is probably no provision in the PIT for taking the confirmation of such person.
It's not a good practice. Whenever you are sharing a UPSI, you have to inform him that I'm sharing, and of course you have to tell him that your name will be updated. If he has not received that information, he can always demonstrate that. If he is an internal person, he can always demonstrate his mailbox and other communications, and your conduct will also speak. If your juniors are aware about UPSI and you are saying that I am not aware about UPSI, the position of yours is such where it is difficult for a regulator to believe that you did not have the access of this UPSI. Then those defenses, those arguments will have no case. But if your documentation and if your conduct speaks loudly that you didn't have the access, there was a case, Praveen, where there was one company which was in a chemical company and they had R&D department, and some persons working in R&D department were covered in designated persons list, and window was closed for him for the financial result as a practice that every designated person window is closed. And he did some trade, and SEBI asked him about this non-compliance. He said that I didn't have a UPSI. SEBI said that the window was closed for you. He said that, but I am sitting there in R&D department. What will I know about financial result? I had no access, and he was able to prove that, and SEBI spared him. They also got it confirmed from compliance officer that actually, though he's classified as DP and window was closed for him, communication was sent, but actually he didn't have history. So if you are a bona fide case, obviously you will be able to prove it via multiple modes, like we discussed.
Perfect. Sir, one of the company having SDD software got malware in the system and had to format the whole system. Due to that, the entire software data got deleted, let's say from beginning 2020. Now, who is the responsible person? What the company should do? How to take the data back?
You have to prove that you had a mechanism to take backup. What efforts you did, that compliance officer will have to demonstrate. But if there is such mishap, even after being organized, and therefore the internal control word which is coming in the regulation 3.5 is very important. It's not just about tamperability, timestamp, and audit trail, because they say that you should have enough internal controls to protect that STD, such as timestamp and audit trail. Okay, so timestamp and audit trail, and these not a collective, or those are not the only characteristics of internal control system. So you should be able to demonstrate to the regulator if such situation occurs, and regulator asks you that why you do not have SDD. You should be able to demonstrate that what is the effort which you took from against to protect your data against such mishap which may happen? What were the antivirus? What were the firewalls? What were the safety measures which you had to ensure that there are enough internal controls? Only then uh, you may be spared.
Whether the exchange will be taking a lenient view in spite of the fact that the software is not the property of the company and it's a third-party software, which always the company does not have any control.
Company does not have control. Company has to ensure. Company should be able to demonstrate what company did. Like, in a famous share transfer agent case, what happened? Ultimately, we are principal and he is agent. He is supplying some software, but we as a principal have to get satisfied that it has enough controls. So many times our client, their technology team runs into several VAPT tests for the vendor who is going to supply SDD. And only if they are satisfied, only then they will engage a vendor. So what you did to ensure that the compliances are done, that has to be good enough.
Okay. Sir, the sharing of price sensitive information includes the sharing of tally data sharing.
Sharing of?
Tally data sharing.
Of course, if it contains price sensitive information. If you are sharing some tally data which is about some ledger of a particular account, then obviously not. But if you are sharing complete tally access, obviously it is giving access to UPSI, particularly if you are in a financial result closure period or even otherwise.
Particular account data may also be classified if I think it's of the major customers or the big top 5 clients of the company. So they can see the up and down and the payment receipt and receivables, all that. So something is really huge amount of outstanding is there. In my view, it can amount to bad debt, so it can impact the prices also.
Absolutely.
So
Sometimes auditors are given access real time to see what is the status. But correct, wherever there are large corporations, this situation occur. But whether every accounting information is the UPSI, my answer to that is no. My answer to that is no. Every accounting information is not UPSI. It has to be price sensitive. Fortunately, in Havel's case, SEBI adjudication order, everyone can read that, where SEBI has taken a view that even if it was about financial result, but there was nothing great in that financial result, nothing upside and downside. It was as per the prediction, as per average, and therefore it was not considered as price sensitive information. Now, I don't mean to say that financial result we need not consider it price sensitive information, but every accounting information considering as price sensitive is also a myth. Is also a myth. Now, what is important is that with respect to financial numbers, what is the price sensitive parameter for me that your protocol, your framework has to prescribe? We have been advocating every session. I shared with Walecha engineering case and Nagarjuna construction case, where SEBI had accepted that if you have numerical parameters and if you have qualitative parameters, and if those are reasonable, and if you are consistently following that, and if you are able to demonstrate via documentation that it was a well thought decision, then SEBI will always respect that view and may spare that. So please refer to these two pronouncements of adjudication orders and what regulators looks at. That input can be useful to you to put your framework around what can be considered as a UPSI and what will not be considered as a UPSI.
perfect. Whether it will be compulsory to maintain the details of UPSI shared with the regulators, like exchanges.
Whether it is compulsory to
Maintain
share.
the details of UPSI shared with the exchanges.
If you are sharing UPSI, you will have to update SDD. If you are sharing UPSI with any regulator, then you will have to make entry in SDD.
Do we need to take the approval of the service provider SDD software from any regulator?
Now I know, Praveen, the earlier question, where it is coming from. Many times when stock exchange send the letters, they ask for MIS reports. And this question came to me from many client companies that should I be sharing MIS? And I said that if you feel that it's price sensitive and you should not be sharing, you say that this is a template in MIS which goes to these people. But what was shared, I did not share it. Why should I share it? If they want, still they want to know. If the regulator still wants to know that what was that MIS, then he will ask specifically, and then you will have to obey anyway. But if there is no need for him to know this particular information, and he may not be asking you that detail, he may be asking you the format. So talk to him, understand from him what is that you are really asking when you are asking MIS reports. Are you asking the details, or are you asking the format, or are you asking what? Then he will say that no, give me the format and tell me with these individuals what all you had shared.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to engage with those who are asking these details.
Understood. It's on a need to know basis always.
Yeah.
So do the service provider of SDD software has to get approval of any regulatory body for the SDD software?
Not required as such from a regulatory body, but he has to get enough checks done with respect to a vulnerability test of that tool, so that it is prone to such malware attacks, and at least some reasonable protection, decent protection is there, is provided in that tool. It's very important for him, because as an agent, he will also get dragged into litigation if it is not fulfilling the basic protection framework.
Ideally, the software should have got certified themselves from the regulator, so that the clients companies are always into relief. Take it, it's not my tension now. The software, it's like approved ISI. As an unlisted lending investment bank, a very interesting question, sir. As an unlisted lending investment bank, we deal with the listed companies for fundraising or sale aside or buy side transactions. In such cases, we receive UPSI from a client. Do we need to maintain the name, PAN, and other SDD details of the employees of the listed companies from which we have received the UPSI?
Yes, we have to maintain name of the employee from whom you received, which listed company, what is the nature of UPSI, and within your bank, whom all, with whom you shared this information.
In spite of the fact that the bank is unlisted.
That doesn't matter, because you are falling under 3.5, person who is required to handle UPSI of your own or of your other listed company.
Okay. This is a typical question when the agenda for board meetings, approvals of financials is shared through hand delivery. Even then, the entry is required to be in the SDD.
Yes, and whoever shares hand delivered document, if you keep open envelope, then his name also should be entered.
Oh yes, that is. But I'll ask you one practical question, sir, which I have seen. Let's say one of the directors in Delhi, and the company's board meeting is, let's say board is sitting into Mumbai, but that person is joining through Delhi. And sometimes senior people doesn't like to have to see the data and documents on the screen. They wanted to have a physical copy. Now, how the physical copy made available? Because if let's say tomorrow morning, 11 o'clock is the board meeting, the board might get the document at 9 o'clock in the morning, or lastly in the late night or the previous night only. How to make the data available to that person? Because the data will not move on email, it will not float on any other system. And if in any case, either it has to be printed in, let's say, Delhi office or by someone in Delhi, and that person has to carry it, then what is the best way to maintain the same?
Yeah, so you have to ensure that you engage a person who will maintain secrecy, and his name will have to be entered in SDD. Share it with him and request him to give that print, and tell him that you cannot give it to anyone else for sharing. You cannot delegate it further. You have to personally go and deliver that document to the director. So his name has to come. But while selecting him, our process of who will be admitted as insider, that guidance will have to be followed. That will be prescribed in your code.
Should I brief the practical scenario how this situation was handled in a company? I had seen this. The company took the access of the printer at Delhi from Mumbai. They gave the command, the document was printed, and it was all for the whole time it was on a video call.
So and he picked up from the printer himself or what?
Yes, the office boy, he picked up the document from the printer. Again, one person was sitting with the camera on, and then he put the document in an envelope. He sealed it completely, signed it. Then he himself moved to the director's place. At the director's place, the seal was checked, and then it was given to the director with a confirmation, yes, this document is sealed. And the company also sees the document on an camera on.
So the office boy and the camera person, their
Yeah.
names also has to come in SDD. That's an additional compliance which I'm telling.
Oh. Even though they don't understand about the EPCD, but it has to be there.
That you cannot assume.
Correct. Absolutely correct. So, one again interesting question: what is the minimum amount of penalty levied on the listed companies levied by the listed company on the designated person for breach of the contract?
There have been good amount of penalties. I have seen 50 lakhs, up to 50 lakhs penalty levied by company on.
Generally, I think the SDD compliances, when the policy is approved, the company prepare a bracket or the non-compliances and the amount involved, and based on that, the amount of penalty is decided by the.
Yeah. So there is a penalty framework. Repeat default. What is the default? Whether it is procedural or a violation, serious violation. What is the level of person? What is the profit made if there is a trade? Whether there is a repeat defaults. These are some parameters in lower level and higher level. So these are 5-6 parameters.
Even there are non-monetary punishment also there.
Non-monetary punishment sometimes, wherever these are too procedural, it can be non-monetary. But now independent directors, audit committee, chairmen are very particular that they don't want to get letter tomorrow saying that why did you acted in a particular way. So with respect to penalty, a framework also is desirable and it has to be a little strict so that you say that what is the action which I have taken. There was Justice Dave committee, if I am not wrong, Praveen, where this subject was discussed that if there are companies where there are repeat non-compliances of prohibition of insider trading, then there should be question on audit committee and managing directors and board. And thereafter, this 2019 amendment also says that managing director has to ensure that there is an internal mechanism and audit committee's duty being casted to say that the mechanism is working effectively and efficiently. So already 2 managing directors have been, one of them have been show caused, one of them have been levied penalty for not having enough controls on insider trading. So the next question is independent director was sitting in audit committee. So you have to demonstrate a policy framework, be transparent, impartial, independent, document it. Whenever there is a deviation, record rational. All of that is necessary. Like a speaking judgment is delivered by a judge, which is subject to appeal. So when you go to appeal, your judgment should speak that why did you took this call?
The basis of judgment and facts. When UPSI is shared among a few DPs internally, does the compliance officer need to send the concerned DP a trading window closure notice?